Good morning and happy Father's Day. The scripture this morning is from John 15, verses 12 through 14. This is my commandment: love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. May God add his blessing to the reading and hearing of his word.
Thank you for being with us today on Father's Day. When Pastor Claire asked me if I could deliver a sermon, I was a little concerned. I asked her what she'd like me to talk about. And she said, well, you wrote a book about your experiences teaching the Sunday school class here for the teenagers. Just talk about that. So I felt very confident that that was something I could do. Much more confident than I did in the spring of 1984 when Al Brown, the senior pastor here at the time, asked me to teach a Sunday school class for teenagers. I was reluctant, as you might imagine. But he used a proven gambit to get me to agree. He challenged my manhood. He said, well, if you are afraid, well, the gauntlet had been tossed down. I said, I didn't really say, listen, bud, but I was thinking that. I said, well, I was struck by lightning. I didn't tell him I was on an airplane when it happened. And I spent a hitch in the Marine Corps. And my tax returns have been audited by the IRS. I am not afraid of anything. I'll do it. My hubris put me on a path of 33 years getting to know and love teenagers. And as you know, teenagers, they're a little bit under construction, both physically, mentally, and the way they deal with the world. Today's scripture talks about Jesus talking to his friends, the disciples, saying, this is what you need to do. This is my commandment. Not this is a suggestion. This is something I would like you to do, or you might think about it. This is my commandment, that you love each other as I have loved you. Babies are always the cutest things. My family has a saying that baby anythings are gorgeous. Possums, rats, rhinos, giraffes, elephants, all baby everythings are cute, particularly baby humans. Have you heard people come up and say, oh, that's the cutest baby I ever saw. That baby is so precious. That baby is so cute. And if they say, oh, that baby looks like you take it as a compliment. Have you ever heard anybody say to you about your teenagers, that's the cutest teenager I ever saw? Their ears outgrow their head. Their arms and legs are growing at prodigious lengths. Their bodies are sending them all these hormonal messages. Their minds are scrambling about how do I deal with the world? How do I learn to accept others? How do I get people to accept me? How do I do all these things? It's just a big mess. I call it teens under construction. If you read today's scripture, love each other, Jesus gave his life literally for us, but I don't think the scripture is saying that to us. It's saying in a more broadly sense, you need to reach outside yourself and give to others. Don't be a narcissist and just think about what's in it for me. Think what you can do for someone else. Can you love someone else and show them what Jesus tried to teach all of us? If so, I think you can be rewarded. Now with teenagers, that's a little difficult. I wondered when Dr. Al Brown asked me to teach the Sunday school, what in the world was he thinking? I was not a teacher. I didn't know anything about teaching. I really was reluctant to do this. But then I remembered, well, I taught my kids about the omnipresence of God. God is everywhere. God knows what's happening, and he knows everything about you. So you need to be aware of, even when you're not around your dad or your mom, you need to behave yourself because God is watching what you're doing. So I pulled Andy in. He's the youngest. I thought I could influence him a little bit more. And I said, Andy, do you know where God is? He didn't say anything. He just kind of shrugged. I said, in a louder voice, Andy, do you know where God is? He still didn't say anything. Then I said, well, do you think your brother Mike knows where God is? He still didn't say anything. Being a bit frustrated, I said, okay, go back and play with your brother. But I followed Andy to go back and see what he said to Mike. I overheard Mike say, what's up with Dad? And Andy responded, well, apparently God is missing and Dad thinks we did it. In 1984, the youth group that met in the afternoon or Sunday evening was more of a social group. They had activities, they did all kinds of things at a meal. So we decided to take a more academic approach for the Sunday school class that met in the mornings. And I figured that in a Christian setting, we ought to teach teenagers who are trying to become adults how to learn how to get along in the real world, some things that would help them do that. I also was a little late coming to this, but I figured out that teenagers are only there for 4 years, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors, then they usually graduate and go on. So I really only needed 4 lessons that took those 4 years, because in the 5th year I could go back to lesson 1 and teach the same thing. So we came up with 4 different ideas. One of those was, who am I? Where am I going? What tools am I going to take with me? And what am I going to do when something goes wrong? I wanted the kids to think about who they are ethnically, who they are in their lineage, who they are nationality, who they are theologically, philosophically. How do they relate to the world? Where are you going? What are your aspirations? What are your dreams? You want to be a doctor? You want to be a lawyer? You want to be a teacher? You want to be a preacher? What do you want to do with your life's journey? And what tools do you want to take with you? Prayer, the Bible, community of faith, your friends. All of these things will be good for you as you go through life's journey. And then finally, because I knew, what am I going to do when something goes wrong? We all need that kind of direction. The other time we go through a year and talk about images of God. And there are thousands of images of God. You can put 3 or 4 different adjectives together and come up with any number of images for God. My father was a judge, so I had a good idea of what a judge meant. Sits up on a high bench, has a bank in front, listens to the story, and then makes a decision. But king, mother, father, shepherd, all of the different things that we think about God determine a little bit how you relate. If you think about God as your mother, you're usually close to your mother because your mother's always got your back. If you think about God as a king, it's maybe a little further distance away. Or a judge, it's more judgmental. So how you think about God sometimes interprets how you really get that into your heart. We also talked one year about the adventures of Paul. And Colorado, as you know, approved the legalization of marijuana. So I thought we're going to get these kids' attention. One of the lessons we call Paul Gets Stoned. They were listening and paying attention. So we told this story about Paul and Barnabas going to Lystra and getting run out of town, and they get stoned. To make this realistic, I wadded up a bunch of newspaper and taped it with some painting duct tape, and it had all these stones made out of crumpled up newspaper. And somebody volunteered to be Paul, and we all stoned Paul. And if you're a teenager and you're sitting in that class and you're not paying attention, you could get whapped upside the head with a stone. But it brought that story of the Bible home to them about the determination of Paul in starting and delivering the new church. We also talked about a survey of the New Testament, because I thought if they're going to come and they want to be in a church setting, they ought to know something about what we're talking about. So we talked about the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, seen through one eye. So I called it the one-eyed gospel. And it drove home to them that Matthew, Mark, and Luke kind of tell the same stories in many of the same ways, but with a little bit different touch. But John's gospel is more elegant, goes more into a theological approach of what Jesus is all about. We talked about the Acts of the Apostles. We talked about the letters of Paul. And then we got to the mother of all mystery books, the Revelation of John. Now, in the book of John, you know, there's all these visions and all of these demons and all these very vivid descriptions of things. But it's kind of hard to figure out what the heck they're talking about. And one of those is the beast, the sign of the beast, 666. So I told the kids about gematria, the ancient practice of using alphanumeric symbols to decode how they might relate to other disparate things. So you could take 666 and figure out somebody whose name had 6 letters in the first name, the middle name, and the last name, and then you could interpret that to be the beast or the Antichrist. If you use that approach, you can come up with Ronald Wilson Reagan. I don't think he was the Antichrist. And so I tried to teach the kids, this is just one way of trying to interpret what the Bible is trying to tell us. But what you really need to know is that there are many ways to pray this and come to heart. But one day, this girl jumps up and says, oh no, I could be the Antichrist. My first, middle, and last name each has 6 letters. Her younger brother, not missing a beat, said, I knew it all along. Now, when I taught that class, I was older. I had some experience. I had experience with losing loved ones. My childhood sweetheart had passed away at age of 22 after a 5-year battle with cancer. My sister at age 43 had passed away from breast cancer. And my father had passed away from congestive heart failure. So I knew the pain of losing someone that you loved. And I also knew that life goes on and that we have to survive and we have to do it. But I also understood that we can help each other during that time of grief. It was an adult experience that I had that I felt I could help the children get through what is really a terrible thing. And we had occasions over 33 years we had to do that. We had suicides. We had Carrie Coughlin pass away right before Christmas. Sudden, unexplained death and epilepsy. And it devastated the kids because she was such a vibrant, a wonderful person right before, and then she was gone. Jenna Anderson had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and fought for 3 years as a teenager before she passed away. We knew she was sick. We knew she had very difficult odds, but we were devastated when she died. And it was good for us to know as a community of faith, it's important to have someone that loves you when you're going through that grief. We needed to love each other as Jesus had commanded us. We also talked about the Proverbs. You probably have some Proverbs, those witty sayings that King Solomon put down that have a kernel of truth in them. It talked about how you can get along in the world. One of my favorites is, train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And notice it didn't say when he's a teenager, he won't depart from it, because teenagers are a bit rebellious. One of the others I like is, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all those who are destitute. The Methodist Church takes a position on social principles of truth and justice in our society, and the kids learned that. I also took a little bit of a different approach, and I said, I want you to tell us what you know about Proverbs. And I couched it in terms that I have learned that, and then you fill in the blank and put your age. And we really got some doozies. Some of them are profound. One said, I have learned that there is no time but the present. The past exists only in your memory, and the future in your imagination. Age 17. We had some funny ones. I have learned that boys think nothing is funnier than blowing milk out their nose. And boys are like porta potties. They smell like poo, they stink, but when you need one, you really need one. And one of my favorites, I learned that you never hold a cat and start the vacuum cleaner at the same time. Maybe my favorite was really picking on me, and one of the kids said, Charlie's not as dumb as he looks. Today's scripture, you may know, has been turned into a children's song. You may know it. We sing at Vacation Bible School. A lot of kids learn as they're young. This is my commandment. This is my commandment, that you love one another, so your joy may be full. So your joy may be full. So your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another, so your joy may be full. That song adds something to the scripture that I think is important. It really says that if you share and you do according to this commandment, joy comes back to you, that your joy may be full. The point here is that if you give of yourself, you focus outwardly, you don't think about yourself all the time, you can reap these benefits. When I took on the task of teaching a Sunday school class for teenagers, I thought they were asking me for something. They wanted my time. They wanted my dedication. They wanted my commitment to show up on Sunday morning. But what I didn't realize, they were really offering me a gift, an opportunity to love these teenagers over a long period of time so that my joy could be full. This last week, I was up at the annual conference in Billings, Montana, and on Friday I was talking to the Reverend Dr. Dale Beck. Dale served here as a senior pastor, and we were laughing, talking about people that we knew and things that had happened, and some of the teenagers that he had remembered. As I was talking to Dr. Beck, a man walked up and just stood on the periphery of our conversation. He really didn't say anything, he just stood there. And we continued talking for a minute or two, and then Dr. Beck, who recognized this man, said, "John, you may want to buy Charlie's book because it talks about things that happened in a Sunday school class at Hope Church." And John said, "I know, because I was in that class." And I took another look. I looked at him. He had a beard. He was a pretty muscular guy. His bit thinning on top of the hair. And I thought, who is this? I don't remember him. So I had to admit that I was embarrassed. I didn't remember who this person was. And then I said, "Let me look at your badge or name tag, your last name." I said, "Oh, I remember someone with that last name, but her name was Mary." And John said, "That would be me." You can imagine my jaw fell to the table. It took me for a minute to recover. But I realized what he was telling me, and he went on to say his life journey and how he had gotten to this commitment of faith through time, that he had undergone a transition from a female to a male. And what I saw standing in front of me was a child of God, worthy of respect, worthy of love, and someone that I'd had a contact with earlier that had no idea and could not recognize at all when I saw him. Later that day, I got to meet with his mother, and we talked about things. One of the things that warmed my heart about this church and your commitment to loving each other, that he said while he was a teenager, his body was sending him all these mixed signals, his brain was scrambled, he got picked on at school, he was just not getting along, he was struggling. But when he came to this church, he felt accepted, and he felt that someone loved him, and he felt that he would be okay. And he said that was part of my maturation and my growth process that meant so much to me. And him telling me that story meant so much to me because it was shocking to meet him. I don't understand that. I don't know all the ins and outs of how that happens, but I could look at him and know that he was a child of God. He's now involved with college campus ministries in the United Methodist Church. He was at the annual conference to work with the different ministries that reach out for young people. And part of that was because of his experience here at Hope Church. Not all teens are under construction. Some grow up to be very successful people. Reverend Annie Rigo Arnoldy was recently named as the Director of Leadership for the Mountain Sky Conference of the United Methodist Church. Eric Arnoldy, her husband, grew up in this church, and he was recognized by Forbes magazine as one of 30 outstanding business professionals under the age of 30. Aaron Ralston, who lost his father this past week, is a nationally known speaker, outdoorsman, and enterprise person who worked with this church as a teenager. Carrie and Brent Motes grew up in this church, and now they come back, and it warms my heart to see their children as part of this community. We all know that if we reach out to people, it includes people, that makes them feel wonderful, makes them feel accepted, and that's always a good thing. But not all teenagers end up on the accomplished list. They're still on the under construction list. From this church, we had a 17-year-old who served a 2-year probation for breaking and entering into a private residence. We had a 16-year-old unwed mother. We had a 16-year-old unwed father and not with each other. And we had a 19-year-old who went on the streets and ended up killing someone. That man is now in the Colorado Department of Corrections, has been there for 30 years. He's 49 years old. I went to visit with him last month, and I realized that there's encouragement for all of us that time tends to bring us all around to recognize some universal truths. Janos Taves is his name. He's still serving a prison sentence. And he and I visited for about 5.5 hours. We had a great visit. And he was telling me about an attorney friend of his who was having a very difficult time in his personal life. And I said, well, what are they telling you? He said they were seeking my advice. The attorney asked Janos what would he recommend. And it blew me away that Janos said to this person, you need to get into a church. I don't care if you believe everything that they're saying, but if you go there, people will love you, and people will accept you, and people will help you. And I thought, what a testament for what the church is all about, coming from this young man who's now been in prison for 30 years. I was very much encouraged after visiting with Janos about the youth of this church and the vitality of the message that we can bring to everybody, but it takes an effort to reach out and touch them. I want to leave you with 3 suggestions on how you relate to teenagers. The first is that you acknowledge them. How many times have you walked by a teenager without so much as a, hey, what's up? We walk past them every day and act like they're not even there. Talk to them. Say hello. Introduce yourself. Ask their name. The second thing is to encourage them. Ask them what their dreams are. What do you aspire to be? What are your troubles? Do you have something that's worrying you? Can I help you? Encourage them to think about how they can be part of the community. And then finally, based upon Jesus' commandment to us, love them. It may be difficult, but they're worthy. And they need that respect. And they need that acceptance that loving them can bring them closer to all of us. If you can do these things, if you can love each other as Jesus loved us, and you can live into Jesus' commandment, then your joy can be full. Thank you. Thank you. If the ushers would come forward, we'll have the offering.